Good morning. Let's try that again. Good morning. Wonderful, wonderful. I am so happy to see everybody here this morning. If I may, I'd like to offer just a suggestion, piece of advice. If you will, take it or leave it, do what you want with it. But may I suggest, on Sunday mornings, get up about 6 or 6:30. I know that's early. But if you set your alarm and you wake up early and you start to prepare yourself for worship, that means that the preparation starts Saturday night because you have to make sure you go to bed in enough time to wake up early enough. But you start preparing yourself for worship. Heads of households, it starts with you. I got to be honest with you. I am so ready for this morning, and I feel almost emotionally spent before I even got here this morning. And I want to share with you all of that. I get to do both the class and the Lord's Supper today, which I'm really excited about. But just a little piece of, takeaway, or you can leave it and use Sunday to sleep in, whatever. Just as long as you're here for our Bible class, that'll be great. Coming into our study in the book of Psalms, so we have 3 more studies, including today. So after today, we'll have 2 more where we're looking into the Psalms for various different things. All of this is under the umbrella of a theme, and that theme is wisdom is the principal thing, therefore get wisdom. Or just the whole idea of preparing ourselves, equipping ourselves, and giving ourselves that wisdom. In the Proverbs, or in the Psalms rather, when we look into the Psalms, I know I've stated this every time, and I probably will do so this time and the next 2 times as well, with regards to a quote that I found Martin Luther said, which I thought was very insightful, in which he makes this statement, but I want to focus and key in on the Psalms were written as if they were composed exclusively for the reader's sake. And we've talked about the fact that you've opened up the book of Psalms and you've looked and you have seen, man, that is just what I needed. And today is going to be no different than the other series that we've studied, because today we are talking about Psalms of Lament. So, some of you Bible students, spiritually minded people, your minds are automatically going to go to some place as we start working through these Psalms, especially here in the beginning. And I want to ask you to hold off. We're going to spend a little bit of time kind of developing this theme and this idea of Psalms of Lament. Are you ready? Okay. This is a tough topic. It really is. It is not easy to talk about. It is not easy to talk through. But I hope by the end of this, we'll have a better appreciation, especially as children of God, for the Psalms of Lament. First of all, what does it mean to lament? What does that even mean? That's not a word that we use in our everyday vernacular, is it? When was the last time you said the word lament? Okay, I don't see any hands, so I'm taking that as you have not said it, or we're there. So let's talk about this. What is it to lament? What does that mean? Alan?
One synonym would be to mourn.
Okay, mourn, right. Good. What else? Whining, okay, yeah, a negative, putting it in that context, whining, that's absolutely right. And when we think about the Psalms and the children of Israel, what does our mind immediately turn to when we think of that word whining? Complain, and what are we going to make the connection with? The wilderness wanderings. They were whining and complaining the entire time. Okay, what else? This is good. This is good. Let's keep going.
A form of regret, whether it's justified
Yes.
or not.
Yes. Yeah.
Might not be justified as in
True.
the Israelites in the wilderness.
Absolutely. A form of regret. You find that. There's one that I haven't heard yet that I want to make sure that we call out here. Grieve. To grieve. That's very closely related. And when we grieve physically, what do? We cry. We weep. Now, crying, weeping, mourning, grieving, are these bad things? No. They're emotions that God gives. Even Jesus, we can see, Jesus participated in weeping. I remember when I was a kid, John 11:35, shortest verse in the whole Bible. Jesus wept. I got it. But Jesus wept, lament. He cried. He felt deep sorrow and deep grief. And so when we dive into this idea of lament and the Psalms in lament, this is the Webster's Dictionary of the word lament. It is a passionate expression of grief or sorrow. So this isn't a, I don't know, I smashed my finger and I'm crying, or somebody, stole the dollar from me at the dollar store, right? This is deep-seated, internal, gut-wrenching stuff that we're talking about here. Other words, I think you all did a really good job. Sorrow, mourning, hopelessness. When we think about lament, the writers almost always have this sense of there is no hope. There is nowhere to turn. A lament arises from the midst of distress. Are you emotionally in a good place when you are lamenting? No. Now, you don't have to raise your hand, but I want you to think internally. Have you ever been in a place of distress, so much so that you feel this overwhelming, passionate sorrow, mourning, and grief? If you have felt that before, when was that? And why was that? Think about that just for a minute. You see, laments, ultimately, they reflect the experience of God's absence. God is not there, right? Because the crier may say, where am I going to turn? We're going to dive into that just a little bit more, a little bit later here, all right? In sorrow, grief, and mourning, are they a part of our world today? It's kind of a rhetorical question, right? Because we've already talked through, and maybe we were even talking through our own experience, our own distress. Maybe you're making that connection with that extreme sorrow. Job 14 and verse 1, Job said this, and this is very insightful what he says. He says, man who is born of a woman is few of days and full of trouble. And I used to grow up with my old preacher mentor, Hoyt Houchin, who used to just look at us and say, man's a few short days and full of trouble. And he would almost say that to us like it was a fact. It wasn't like something like, oh, hey, look at what I just found. It was like, yes, this is known, and this is real. Man's a few short days and full of trouble. So let's talk about laments in the Psalms. A little bit of history here. Psalms describe the crisis as a sojourn in Sheol. What's Sheol? What is that? It's the place of death. And if the Psalms are describing a sojourn in Sheol, what does that mean? Yeah, in Psalm 23, it talks about, you lead me through the valley of the shadow of death. Let's not talk about the conclusion to that statement just yet. But if you think about it, it's so funny. It's so weird because I read this Japanese story to my children last night. They were given I was given a book of old traditional Japanese stories. And one of the story last night that we read was about this. He was an instrumentalist, and he would go and he would play for people, but he was blind, so he couldn't see anything. And he ends up being duped by a bunch of ghosts who want to hear about their ancient past of this battle that happens, and he's walking through the midst of a graveyard, and he's playing for ghosts in the graveyard. But when it comes down to it, the people who discovered this blind man, because he doesn't know, he's being deceived, and they are terrified when they realize where this man is. But if you think about, from the perspective of a sojourn in Sheol is a walk amongst death. It's not a very light place, is it? It is very dark indeed. Sheol is the world of the dead, the underworld, the dark, shadowy realm of death. Helplessness and terror characterize the experience of one gripped by the power of death. This is what we see in the Psalms. Some laments that we see. For in death there is no remembrance of you. God, Yahweh, that's who he's talking to. In Sheol, who will give you praise? The cords of Sheol entangled me. The snares of death confronted me. If you have ever felt so emotionally weighed down that you are in this place, then you know what the psalmist is talking about. And you can make a connection with this idea that I'm at the precipice here. Some people call this rock bottom. Some people call this place rock bottom. That's where these psalms come from. You can see David when he is being chased by Saul. He is at rock bottom. And literally, he is on the rock at the bottom of a cave. He is so rock bottom. And he's able to write these things. I would dare say that if you are not at rock bottom, you're not going to be able to fully understand and appreciate what's being written. But when you are, then you're like, oh, okay, I totally connect with what's going on here. There are different kinds of laments. We see prayers being offered by sick people. We see those who have been falsely accused. Those who have been falsely accused, Psalm 22, an excellent example of this. Do y'all know Psalm 22, by the way? Just off the top of your head? It's the one before 23. It's the one Jesus quotes on the cross. They have encircled me, strong bulls of Bashan. And it is just this, wow. My God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me? My God, I cry to you by day, but you do not answer, and by night, but I find no rest. And that is where Jesus does quote, my God, why have you forsaken me? Those facing malicious gossip You know, we talk about gossip as like that's something that we ought not to do. But this is taking it from the perspective of somebody that this is being done about. And if you want a if-then, right, or a case in point, you can see some of the psalmists who are crying out because they are being gossiped about. Psalms of innocence. I didn't do this. I don't deserve this. Almost like psalms of injustice that's been done. Pleas for asylum. Those are those save me, O God, psalms that we see. Prayers of the oppressed, prayers from persecution, psalms of penitence. That's another one of those words that we don't use in our everyday lives, but what does psalms of penitence mean? When you're repenting, when you are sorry for what you have done. And we're going to spend a lot of time next week looking at that one. And then there are general laments, things that just can be grouped together. Continuing on, laments in the Psalms. If you want, go ahead and turn over to Psalm 102. And we'll just really quickly touch on this one. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time in this psalm. But I want you to look at the heading or the title of the psalm itself. When you get there, somebody read for me, what does that title say? What is the heading of this psalm?
A prayer of one afflicted when he is faint and pours out his complaint before the Lord.
Okay, a prayer of one afflicted when he is faint and pours out his complaint before the Lord. Let's talk about that word faint. Does that mean like, oh, pass out, faint? What is that? What do we mean when we say that?
Mine says overwhelmed.
Okay, overwhelmed. That's a good one. What else? What's that? Weak. Weak, that's right. Overwhelmed, weak. Why would somebody be overwhelmed and weak? Yourself. Why would yourself be overwhelmed and weak? Depressed, okay. Okay, so there's a form of like the depression, it zaps the energy from you. It kind of draws away any substance that you have, or your constitution has been compromised, right? What else? What might cause this to happen? Okay, lack of sleep. That's good. That's good. Stress, lack of sleep, depression. And what's causing all of that?
That whole list that we went through before.
Yes, that whole list that we went through before. And there are other things that we experience in this life. Remember, I asked you, is lamenting new to, or does it exist today? And you all agreed, yeah, we do lament in today's day and age. But what causes us to lament? Maybe some of those things. Maybe just really extremely disappointed with our circumstances. And I don't mean disappointed like I wish I had a better job or I wish my grades were better or, but my children, and I don't know if you've experienced this as well, but my children have often expressed, when they learned the story of the garden, specifically the fall, Adam and Eve, when they took of that apple, or that fruit, you know where their mind goes, right? You tell me. When they learn about the fall, what immediately do they start thinking? What do you start thinking? If they hadn't done that, we wouldn't be in such a mess. And then you get to the point where you internalize that and you realize that and you're like, this is a mess. I want out of this. Stop it. A prayer of one who is afflicted. Look at the first verse. What does the first verse say? Hear my prayer, O Lord, and let my cry come to you. Bryce, you're going to want to be ready here in just a minute. Hear my prayer, O Lord, and let my cry come to you. Your words. In your words, what would you say? What's going through your mind if you're saying these words? God, listen. And don't just listen, act. Now. Please. Please. I want to play for you a song. It's taken from this text. Hear my prayer, O Lord, and let my crying come unto you. It was written, the name is Purcell. Purcell was the composer. He's a classical composer. And he wrote the song for a double choir, which means there's 4 parts in a choir generally, soprano, alto, tenor, bass. And then there's another choir with soprano, tenor, alto, bass. So he wrote 2 choirs at the same time. And they are singing this song, and they are singing these words. And what they're doing is one voice says, hear my prayer, O Lord. It starts off with the altos, and then the sopranos come in, and then they echo at the top, and let my crying come unto you. And then they're just all 8 parts are tossing this message into the void over and over and over, and they don't say anything else. And I know that we've talked about 7-11 songs, 7 words used 11 times. That's what this is, but when you hear it, you are hearing the heart's cry. I can never listen to this song just once, but then I can never listen to it twice. I can't listen to it once because I don't feel like I get the full effect, but I can't bear to listen to it twice because I feel like it makes a deep connection with what's happening here. I want you to listen to this song. We're going to hit play in just a second. As you do, try to pick out, maybe just follow one of the parts, or maybe just try to find when the tenors, they cry out and they say, and let my crying come unto you, or the basses from the bottom, from the depths, from the pit, say, and let my crying come. Bryce, if you would.
Thank you.
My goal is not to take you down as far as I possibly can and then just leave you there. But I got to tell you, that is a heart's cry. That is a passionate outpouring and lament. Hear my prayer, O Lord, and let my crying come to you. But you're going to notice a shift now. I've had a very gray, very drab, very boring, very dark theme, even on the multimedia side of this presentation. However, the laments are almost unanimously moving toward a crisis at hand. In our own lives, we may have times of lament and we may have times of hopelessness. And I'm sad to say that some people they stop right there. And they don't go any further. They get to this point of helplessness, and then it's almost like they cease to exist. It's almost as if they have given up. But not the psalmists. Unanimously. They are always driving towards some kind of resolution. The general focus of these psalms is to find its resolution in thanksgiving for God's deliverance from the crisis. They all start off this way, but as you read them over and over again, then you start to see this theme develop where they pour out this crying and they are in the pits of despair, but do they stay there? No. Alan?
It's interesting that piece that we just heard, it kept on sounding like he was going to resolve it to like a major key, and just when it sounded like it was going to resolve, it went back, it flatted, to a minor. And
Yeah.
I don't want to jump the gun on what you're saying, but
Yeah.
But comes up a lot.
There is,
at the end of Psalms, at the end of a psalm.
Exactly.
But,
But
Lord.
and that's right. And so that's what I want to focus on. And then we're going to end with hopefully something that is encouraging and edifying. There are two basic points that I want to make about the Psalms here. Number one, the Psalms recognize that even before modern psychology that we do not deal with pain by ignoring it, but by acknowledging it and moving through it. And I hear talk of therapists, and what is a therapist? They're somebody who, they want to be somebody to talk to. Why? Because you ever heard the term, I got to get this off my chest, right? It's weighing down, and I've got to get it off. It's such a heavy burden, and if I could just talk about it. Well, that's what the Psalms are. So long before modern psychology said, hey, I've got a great idea. I know how to deal with the problem of pain. Talk about it. Okay, genius. This is where it came from. And number two, the laments, see, they accept the fact that pain is a significant and intrinsic part of life, and they seek to put that reality in the context of faith in God. And I would argue that the problem of pain, men have struggled with it. C.S. Lewis wrote a book about it. And he wrote two books about it, actually. He wrote The Problem of Pain, and then when somebody very dear to him died, he wrote something else, and he called it A Sorrow Realized. Because he was dealing with this idea of pain. But see, the Psalms, what they do is they put all of that pain, and they don't ignore it, and they don't say, this isn't happening to me, it's a figment of my imagination, or even worse yet, just get over it. They put all of their pain and all of their suffering in a proper context, and that context was the reality that they had faith in God. The laments do not ignore the pain of life, but put it in the context of faith in Yahweh, restating the point. The certainty that God hears the prayer is a dominant note in the laments. The Psalms call upon God to act as God should and deliver and bring justice as promised. And the speakers, they expect it to happen. They do. And so this whole idea of the problem of pain, and then when Jesus on the Sermon on the Mount, what does he say? He says, be anxious about nothing. And he's not telling you, get over it. He is telling you to put it in the context of faith in God. Now, let me ask you a question. What about somebody who doesn't believe in God? Where do they go? They go to their inner self, right? And then we have these professions that are, and I don't mean any disrespect, but making money hand over fist here, because they're being that resource, and not speaking against anybody who may have had conversations with therapists or needs that or anything like that. But I would argue here that with regards to the Psalms themselves, their hope is in the Lord. Their faith is in the Lord. And they put all of these things in a context where they are looking to the Lord for guidance. They didn't have pharmaceutical companies back then that could manufacture stuff that would make them feel better. And they didn't have the different professions of self-help that we have today. They had Yahweh. And that's what they did. And they had great faith in him. And so what I'd like to do is I'd like to actually look at one psalm with you. Psalm 13. We're going to just look over this psalm really quickly. I want you to look at the last verse. Somebody look at the last verse of Psalm 13 and read it nice and loud. And then for those on the live stream, I'll repeat it after it's been read. Psalm 13, I believe it's verse 6. That's the last one, right? Yeah. I will sing to the Lord, for he has been good to me. That's the end of the psalm. Does that sound like somebody who's in the pits of despair? No. That is not where this person starts, though, is it? What does the first verse say?
Will you forget me forever?
How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? Is this a long psalm? No, it's 6 verses. It doesn't take him very long. So how on earth does he get from this point to the very end where he is saying, I will sing to the Lord, for he has dealt bountifully with me? Look at the despair. Is this going to end well? I mean, if you started off a conversation with somebody, and let's just say it's a mentor-mentee relationship, and you go up to that person and you say, Mentor, are you going to keep forgetting me, ignoring me? How long? Forever? Really? Okay, right? So that's where the psalmist is starting here. How long is actually mentioned 4 times. How long will you forget me? How long are you going to hide your face? How long must I take counsel in my own soul? How long will my enemies be exalted over me? If we just stopped reading the psalm right there, how are you going to resolve this? How are you going to make yourself feel better? If you're the person who's saying these things, where's the resolution? If you're asking God, how long is he going to forsake you and how long is he going to forget you? How do you resolve that? Right? Mike? Sounds like he's forgotten how much God has helped him in the past. Okay, right. If we were to stop this psalm right here and I was to say, you're dismissed, thanks. I feel like you'd feel like you were gypped. Really? That's where we're going with this class? And then he makes a plea for help. Look at this. Verse 3, consider and answer me, O Lord my God. Light up my eyes, lest I sleep the sleep of death. So now, what he's done is he's made a statement. How long, how long, O Lord? Okay, Lord, please, consider me, answer me, light up my eyes, so that I won't see death. I don't want my enemies to have prevailed over me, lest my foes rejoice because I am shaken. Here's the root of the problem. I'm feeling abandoned because I have enemies, and they're all around me. They're angry with me. They want to rejoice over my demise. Lord, this is specifically what I'm going to ask for. And look at the shift. But I trust you. I have trusted in your steadfast love. My heart shall rejoice in your salvation. So the psalmist here, David, is writing, I feel forsaken. This is what I would like to ask. It's in your hands. And then he ends the psalm with, I will sing to the Lord because he has dealt bountifully with me. Now, I don't know if this is, well, I can tell you what I think. Yes, recalling the former times when God saved him out of the hand of the lion and saved him out of the hand of the bear and saved him out of the hand of Goliath. You have dealt bountifully with me. But there's also a sense where the faith that David has is so profound in God that God answering David is a foregone conclusion. God will help me. I trust in your steadfast love. So, I'm asking these questions, and I'm already rejoicing because I already know that you are going to save me. It's a foregone conclusion that you're going to help me. Yes, sir. Yes.
I think we can recognize ourselves in that when we say, yeah, but this is different. You know, with Goliath,
Yeah.
he's the one that took on Goliath. With the lion, he might have been the one to take on the lion. But in this case, this may be while Saul is pursuing him.
Mm-hmm.
And he's not taking on Saul. Saul is just like day by day for how long?
Yeah.
Trying to kill him, chasing him.
Right.
Wherever he goes, he shows up.
Yeah.
And so it's flipped around. So then we say, yeah, but
This time is different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is beyond anything that I've been through before.
Right. And that's a good point, you know, that we can look at this, we can put ourselves in this position, you know, that David, you know, he did take on a lion, he did take on a bear, he took on Goliath. He did say that God delivered me from the hand of the lion. God delivered me from the hand of the paw of the bear. Think about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, though, right? Just let your mind wander over to those guys. When you think about this fact that, okay, well, but this is different. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were against very, very heavy odds. They weren't getting out of that situation. to be honest with you. It doesn't matter what kind of different there is different there, but Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego said, our God will save us. But did they end a statement there? Even if he doesn't. Accepting the fact that God ultimately was in control, and it was God's decision whether or not to help them. They were going to be okay no matter the outcome. That's what I see in David here. My enemies are here. If they kill me, great. Paul, what did Paul say? For me, to die is gain. To live is Christ, but to die is gain. Right? So we have this sense that the Lord's blessing is in the heart of the writer of the Psalms. And it is almost like that song that we sing, have your way. Yes, Lord, yes, have your way. Good point, though. Thank you so much, Brother Allen. Laments in the faith. Laments do not ignore the pain of life. Okay, so going back to that previous slide, right? The Psalms call upon God to act as God should and deliver and bring justice as promised, and the speakers, they expect it to happen. We have 2 minutes left. How can we do the same? If laments and if sorrow and if this depths of despair are a very real part of our life and something that we're very connected with, all of us, individually, in our own head and in our own level, how do we do this? I want to present these passages to you. 1 Thessalonians 4, verse 13, is that passage that's talking about how to deal with death. And Paul, the writer, he basically says, we don't want you to be uninformed considering those who have gone asleep in the Lord. We don't want you to be uninformed. And there's a whole statement in there about we do not want you to be like those who have no hope. Why? Because you do have hope. Because, yeah, this is a bad situation, but you are not like the rest of the world. Your sorrow needs to be put in the context of a relationship with Yahweh. And when it is put in that context, you do not need to grieve like somebody who has no hope. Matthew 5 and verse 4, blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be, you finish it, they shall be comforted. Psalm 34 verse 18, now my memory isn't there with me anymore. I was doing pretty good up until that point. Psalm 34 verse 18, the Lord is near to the brokenhearted, and he saves the crushed in spirit. When you're in the pit of despair, do you want a relationship with Yahweh? I do. In fact, that's when I want it the most because of these truisms here. 1 Corinthians 1, verse 3 through 4 is one other that I want to mention just quickly, and I know I'm up against the clock here. 1 Corinthians 1. Oh, give me a minute. 1, verse 3 and 4. That's a misprint, so I'm going to have to get back with you on that one. 2 Corinthians? Yes. 1, verse 3 and 4. Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercies and the God of all comfort, who, listen, comforts us in our affliction, that we may be able to comfort those who are in any affliction. And then he does a very Paulism thing here, and he says, with the comfort with which we are comforted by God. Right? And finally, the passage in Revelation, God shall what? He shall wipe every tear from their eyes. Psalms of Lament. Thank you. You've been very, very attentive, and I appreciate the participation this morning.